My name is Mackenzie, and I never thought my own grandfather would be the one to destroy everything I'd worked for. Chester Romano had always been the kind of man who believed respect was earned through fear, and unfortunately, I learned that lesson the hardest way possible. I was 22 when this happened, just finishing my junior year at Harvard. Economics major, 3.8 GPA, and I was already interning at Goldman Sachs during summers. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 16, and Chester had been my guardian ever since. He'd moved into our family home in Brookline, Massachusetts, supposedly to take care of me, but looking back, I think he just wanted to control the inheritance my parents left behind. The trust fund was substantial, about $800,000 that was supposed to cover my education and help me get started in life. Chester was the trustee, which meant he had complete control over how and when the money was used. For the first few years, everything seemed fine. He paid my tuition, gave me a reasonable allowance, and I thought he actually cared about my future. But then my cousin Dylan started having problems. Dylan was Chester's other grandchild, his daughter Angela's son. He was 2 years younger than me, and honestly, he'd been screwing up his whole life. He dropped out of 3 different colleges, spent 6 months in rehab for cocaine addiction, and had been arrested twice for drunk driving. But Chester absolutely adored him. Dylan was the golden child who could do no wrong in Chester's eyes. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday in March, and I was home for spring break, studying at the kitchen table. Chester came in holding his phone, his face all flushed and angry. "Mackenzie, we need to talk," he said in that voice that always made my stomach drop. I looked up from my macroeconomics textbook. "What's wrong, Grandpa?" He sat down across from me, folding his hands on the table. "I just got off the phone with Angela. Dylan's been accepted to Northeastern University. He wants to study business." "That's great," I said, though I was genuinely surprised Dylan had managed to get accepted anywhere decent. "Good for him." Chester's expression darkened. "The thing is, Mackenzie, they're asking for $65,000 a year. Angela can't afford it. Not after all the money they've spent on Dylan's previous difficulties." I felt a cold dread creeping up my spine. "Okay, and I think it would be appropriate for the family to help Dylan get this fresh start he needs. The trust fund has enough money to cover his education." I stared at him, certain I must have misunderstood. "Grandpa, that's my college fund. My parents set it up specifically for my education." "Your parents would want what's best for the family," Chester said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when he was about to manipulate me. "Dylan really needs this opportunity, Mackenzie. He's been through so much." "And I haven't?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "I lost both my parents. I've been working my ass off to maintain my grades at Harvard while dealing with grief and trauma. Why should I give up my education for someone who's already wasted multiple chances?" Chester's face went stone cold. This was the first time I'd ever really pushed back against him, and he clearly didn't like it. "Watch your tone with me, young lady. I am the trustee of that fund, which means I decide how it's used, and I've decided that Dylan needs help more than you do right now." "You can't be serious." My hands were shaking. "Grandpa, I have 1 more year left at Harvard. I've already been accepted into their graduate economics program. This is my future we're talking about. You're a smart girl, Mackenzie. You'll find a way to figure it out. Take out student loans like everyone else. Dylan doesn't have your advantages." I laughed, but it came out bitter and harsh. "My advantages? What advantages? Having my parents die and being stuck with a guardian who apparently doesn't give a damn about my future?" Chester stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough. I've made my decision. I'm withdrawing you from Harvard at the end of the semester. The money will be redirected to help Dylan." The room started spinning. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "You can't do that. That money is mine. My parents left it for me specifically." "Your parents left it in a trust with me as the trustee. That means I have full discretionary power over how it's used until you turn 25, and I'm exercising that power now." I spent the next 3 days locked in my room, researching trust law and calling every legal aid office I could find. But the lawyers all told me the same thing. As long as Chester was acting within the broad guidelines of providing for my welfare and education, he had almost unlimited discretion. And technically, he could argue that using the money to help family was in my best interests. The worst part was how Chester started gaslighting me about the whole situation. When I confronted him again, he acted like I was being dramatic and selfish. "Mackenzie, I'm disappointed in you," he said. sitting in his leather recliner like some kind of patriarch holding court. Your parents raised you better than this. Family comes first. Always. My education is important too, I insisted, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Education isn't just about fancy schools and degrees. Sometimes the most important lessons come from learning to sacrifice for the people you love. Dylan is family. He's your cousin. Don't you want what's best for him? The gaslighting got worse over the following weeks. Chester started bringing up every mistake I'd ever made, every time I disappointed him or my parents. He'd say things like, "Remember when you got that C in calculus sophomore year? Maybe Harvard isn't the right fit for you anyway." Or, "Your mother always worried that you were too focused on money and status. She'd be proud to see you putting family first." He even started questioning my memories of conversations we'd had. When I reminded him that he'd promised to support my education through graduation, he'd look at me with this concerned expression and say, "Mackenzie, honey, I never said that. Are you sure you're remembering correctly? You've been under a lot of stress lately." I began to doubt myself. Was I being selfish? Had I misunderstood the purpose of the trust fund? Was Chester right that my parents would have wanted me to help Dylan? But the doubt turned to rage when I found out the truth about what Dylan was actually planning to do with the money. I was helping Chester organize his paperwork in his study when I saw an email thread on his computer. The subject line read, "Dylan's business venture, confidential." My heart pounded as I read through the messages. Dylan wasn't planning to study business at Northeastern. He was planning to use the $65,000 as startup capital for some kind of cryptocurrency trading scheme he'd learned about from a guy he'd met in rehab. The tuition story was complete bullshit. He was planning to gamble away my college fund on some get-rich-quick scam. And Chester knew. The emails made it clear that Chester was fully aware of Dylan's real plans. In one message, Chester even wrote, "I think this could be a great opportunity for Dylan to prove himself as an entrepreneur. Mackenzie doesn't need to know the details. She wouldn't understand the business world like we do." I printed out every single email and confronted Chester that evening. "You lied to me," I said, throwing the papers on his dinner table. "Dylan isn't going to college. He's going to use my money to gamble on some cryptocurrency scheme." Chester barely glanced at the papers. "You went through my private correspondence? How dare you violate my privacy like that? Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. You stole my college fund to give to Dylan for some scam he learned in rehab. You've been lying to me for months. I haven't stolen anything. This is still your money, Mackenzie. Dylan is investing it. When his business takes off, there will be even more money for your education." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Chester, this isn't an investment. This is a gambling addiction. Dylan is going to lose every penny, and you know it. You don't have faith in family," Chester said, his voice taking on that wounded tone he used when he wanted to make me feel guilty. "Dylan has learned from his mistakes. He's ready to take responsibility and build something meaningful. With my money. It's not your money yet. It's family money, and I'm using it to help family." That night I called Angela, Dylan's mother, hoping maybe she didn't know what was really going on. But when I explained the situation, her response shocked me. "Oh, honey," Angela said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Daddy Chester is just trying to teach you about being grateful for what you have. You've been so privileged, going to Harvard and everything. Maybe it would be good for you to experience some struggle, you know? Build character." "Angela, Dylan is planning to gamble away my college fund. Doesn't that concern you at all? Dylan is a grown man who's ready to take some risks and build his future. You should be supporting your cousin, not trying to sabotage him." I realized then that this wasn't just Chester's decision. The whole family was in on it. They'd all decided that I had too much, that I needed to be taken down a peg, and that Dylan deserved a chance to redeem himself with my money. The isolation was the worst part. Chester had always been good at controlling my relationships, but now he ramped it up. When my friends from Harvard called, he'd tell them I was taking a break from school to focus on family responsibilities. When I tried to explain the situation to my few local friends, Chester would somehow get involved and convince them that I was going through a difficult phase and wasn't thinking clearly. He started monitoring my phone calls and internet usage, claiming he was concerned about my mental state and wanted to make sure I wasn't making any impulsive decisions. He even convinced my therapist, who I'd been seeing since my parents' death, that I was having trouble accepting change and might be experiencing some kind of breakdown. The gaslighting became constant. Every day, Chester would find new ways to make me question my own perception of reality. He'd move my things and then act concerned when I couldn't find them. He'd claim I'd forgotten conversations we'd had, or agreed to things I'd never agreed to. He'd bring up incidents from my childhood and describe them completely differently than I remembered them. "Mackenzie, you're starting to worry me," he'd say with fake concern. "These memory problems, this paranoia about family members trying to hurt you. Maybe we should consider getting you some professional help." I started keeping a journal, writing down everything that happened each day, just to maintain some grip on reality. But even then, Chester would sometimes find ways to make me doubt what I'd written. The breaking point came in May, right before I was supposed to return to Harvard for my final year. I was in my room packing when Chester came in and sat on my bed. "Mackenzie, sweetheart, we need to talk about your plans for next year." "I'm going back to school, Chester. I've already registered for classes." He sighed heavily. "Honey, I don't think that's a good idea. You've been so stressed and confused lately. Maybe it would be better for you to take a year off, stay home, get your head straight." "My head is perfectly straight. I know exactly what's going on here." "Do you?" Chester's voice became gentle, almost pitying. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you're having some kind of psychological break. The paranoid thoughts about Dylan, the accusations about me stealing money, these aren't normal responses, Mackenzie. They're normal responses to being lied to and manipulated. See, this is what I'm talking about. This kind of thinking isn't healthy. I've been doing some research, and I think you might be experiencing something called a persecution complex. It's not uncommon in young adults who've experienced trauma like losing their parents." The way he said it, so calm and reasonable and concerned, made me doubt myself for a moment. Was I losing my mind? Was I seeing conspiracies where none existed? But then I remembered the emails, the lies, the way everyone in the family had suddenly turned against me. "I'm not crazy, Chester. I'm being manipulated, and I'm not giving up my education without a fight." Chester's concerned expression shifted slightly, and for just a moment, I saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. But then the mask was back in place. "Of course you're not crazy, sweetheart. You're just confused, and that's okay. We're going to get through this together, as a family." That's when I knew I had to get out. I waited until Chester left for his weekly poker game with his buddies. Then I packed everything I could carry, took the $800 I had saved from my summer job, and left. I had nowhere to go. Chester had systematically isolated me from most of my friends and had control over all my financial resources. But I knew if I stayed, he'd find a way to have me committed or declared mentally incompetent. I spent that first night in a 24-hour diner in Cambridge, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to figure out my next move. I had exactly $763 to my name after paying for a taxi, and no place to stay. My phone kept buzzing with calls from Chester, but I didn't answer. Around 3 a.m, I finally answered one of his calls. "Mackenzie, thank God, where are you?" "I've been worried sick." "I'm fine, Chester. I'm not coming home." "Sweetheart, you're not thinking clearly. Come home and we'll work this out together. As a family. We're not family. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and gaslight each other. Mackenzie, you're scaring me. This kind of paranoid thinking. Please, just come home. We'll get you the help you need." "I don't need help. I need my college fund. I need the money my parents left for me." Chester's voice hardened slightly. "That money is being used appropriately. For family. If you can't accept that, then maybe you don't understand what family means. What I understand is that you've decided Dylan's gambling addiction is more important than my education. It's not gambling. It's an investment. And frankly, Mackenzie, your attitude lately has made me question whether you deserve that investment. Maybe this experience will teach you some humility and gratitude." That's when I finally understood. This wasn't really about Dylan or money or family priorities. This was about power. Chester needed to prove that he could control me, that he could take away everything that mattered to me and force me to be grateful for whatever scraps he decided to give me. I hung up the phone and turned it off. Over the next few days, I reached out to everyone I could think of. Harvard's financial aid office told me that it was too late to apply for sufficient aid for the upcoming semester, but that I could potentially return in the spring if I could prove financial hardship and independence from my guardian. A legal aid lawyer confirmed that my options for challenging the trust were limited, but suggested I document everything and keep fighting. The hardest part was accepting that I was truly alone. Chester had done such a thorough job of isolating me that I had almost no support system left. The few friends who might have helped me had been convinced that I was having some kind of breakdown. My extended family had chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. But slowly, I started to rebuild. I found a job waitressing at a small restaurant in Somerville. The pay was terrible, but the manager let me work double shifts and the other servers were kind to me. I rented a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Chester kept trying to contact me. He'd call my work, send emails, even show up at my apartment building. But his approach had changed. Instead of the concerned grandfather act, he was now angry and demanding. "You're making a huge mistake, Mackenzie," he said during one phone call I stupidly answered. "You think you can survive on your own? You think that little waitressing job is going to lead anywhere? You need me. You need family. And when you come crawling back, you better hope I'm feeling forgiving." But I wasn't going to come crawling back. Instead, I started researching everything I could about Chester's financial situation and the trust fund. I spent my few free hours at the public library, learning about trust law, fiduciary duty, and financial fraud. That's when I discovered something interesting. The original trust documents, which I'd never been allowed to see, were actually quite specific about the fund's purpose. The money was supposed to be used exclusively for Mackenzie Romano's educational expenses and legitimate living costs associated with her education. There was no provision for helping other family members, no matter how worthy their cause. More importantly, I found out that Chester had been taking trustee fees that weren't authorized by the trust document. Over the past 6 years, he'd paid himself nearly $40,000 in administrative costs and trustee compensation that wasn't actually legal under the terms my parents had set up. I also discovered that Dylan's cryptocurrency investment opportunity was actually a well-known scam. The company he was planning to invest with had been shut down by the SEC just 2 weeks earlier, and several people had already lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the scheme. Armed with this information, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in trust litigation. She agreed to take my case on contingency, which meant I didn't have to pay unless we won. "This is a clear case of breach of fiduciary duty," she told me during our first meeting. "Your grandfather has been violating the terms of the trust and potentially committing fraud. We can definitely fight this." The legal process took 8 months, but we won. The judge not only ordered Chester to return all the money to the trust, including the $40,000 in illegal fees he'd taken, but also removed him as trustee and appointed an independent third party to manage the fund. Chester was furious. During the court hearing, he stood up and pointed at me, his face red with rage. "You ungrateful little bitch," he shouted before the bailiff could stop him. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? You destroy your own family over money?" But I wasn't destroying my family. I was finally standing up for myself, and for what my parents actually wanted from me. The best part was Dylan's reaction when he found out the cryptocurrency company had been shut down as a scam. He called me crying, thanking me for saving him from losing all that money. He even admitted that he'd never actually been accepted to Northeastern. That had been another lie Chester had told to make the scheme sound more legitimate. "I'm sorry, Mackenzie," Dylan said through tears. "I knew what Grandpa Chester was doing wasn't right, but I was desperate and stupid and I went along with it. You saved me from myself." Angela, on the other hand, was livid. She screamed at me over the phone, calling me selfish and vindictive and accusing me of tearing the family apart. But I didn't care anymore. I'd learned that sometimes the people who claim to be family are actually the ones hurting you the most. I was able to return to Harvard that spring semester, and I graduated summa cum laude the following year. I even completed the graduate economics program Chester had tried to convince me I wasn't smart enough for. Today, I work as a financial analyst at a major investment firm, helping people protect their assets from exactly the kind of manipulation Chester tried to pull on me. Chester never spoke to me again after the court case. He died 3 years later from a heart attack, and I didn't attend his funeral. Some people in the family thought that was cold of me, but I'd learned that I didn't owe my respect or forgiveness to someone who'd tried to destroy my future for his own sense of power and control. The saddest part is that I think Chester actually believed his own lies by the end. He'd convinced himself that he was the victim, that I was the ungrateful granddaughter who'd turned against him for money. But the truth was simpler than that. He was a manipulative man who couldn't stand the idea that someone he controlled might become independent and successful. Looking back, I realized that losing my parents wasn't the worst thing that happened to me as a teenager. The worst thing was being placed in the care of someone who saw my grief and vulnerability as an opportunity to control me. But I also learned that even when you feel completely alone and powerless, even when everyone around you is telling you that you're crazy or wrong or ungrateful, you still have choices. You can still fight for yourself and for what you know is right. The money wasn't really the point, though it was important. The point was proving to myself that I deserved better than being manipulated and gaslight by someone who was supposed to protect me. The point was learning that sometimes the most important thing you can do is walk away from toxic people, even when they're family. So do you agree with my decision to take legal action against my grandfather, even though it meant destroying our relationship and dividing the family? If you've made it this far in my story, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me reach more people who might be going through similar situations. And let me know in the comments what city or country you're watching from. Thank you so much for listening to my story and for supporting others who are trying to break free from toxic family dynamics.